This Joe Paterno story is, it's just incredibly interesting from all angles, and at the same time as it's interesting, it's disgusting. And when I say the Joe Paterno story, unfortunately he's become one of the faces of this story. The real faces of this story, all those hurt. The real face of this story, the guy who perpetrated this crime. Joe Paterno really isn't. His inaction and his name has put him right there in the forefront. I want to get a legal perspective on this. And to do that, we are joined now by lawyer, radio sports legal analyst, and a co-host of a radio show called Offside. Eric Macramella joins us now on ESPN Radio. Eric, I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, Josh. You know, it's funny what you're saying because I completely agree with you. And on the one hand, the case it's from a legal standpoint, it's interesting and it's fascinating and it's compelling. But on the other hand, it's just an uncomfortable case to cover, even from a legal perspective.
I think people have a few questions that I think make a lot of sense. The first one is when they hear an official say Joe Paterno legally did the right thing by going to his superior and telling his superior about what he knows. Legally he did the right thing, but then they say morally he didn't. What I don't understand is legally you should have gone to the police. That would be my understanding. How is it legally sufficient that he just went to his superior?
Well, Josh, that's a good question. And the thing is, at this point here, we actually don't have enough information to make that conclusion that Paterno did the right thing because there's still more information coming out. There's still a chance that he could be up on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice because when his assistant coach, Mike Curley, came in and said there was something going on, Paterno went to Tim Curley, the athletic director, and said, look, there is, quote, they are doing something of a sexual nature. But McQuarrie, in his grand jury testimony, said that he told Paterno in far more colorful terms what had happened. So for Paterno to turn around and tell his supervisor that he was, quote, doing something of a sexual nature, and by him I mean Sandusky, well, that's kind of watering it down a little bit. So it's possible because of that, you could say there's an obstruction of justice charge because he wasn't being completely forthright, was kind of being indirect or evasive. And also, if you find out that he was lying and not telling the truth, well, then that can give rise to a perjury charge. So I've heard that said before, that he's done the right thing, and the Attorney General has come out and said that, at least from a preliminary standpoint, that's what they believe, but the grand jury testimony tells a different story.
You know, we hear of several different people that, the athletic director, Curley, and others who have been implicated on this over the weekend. How many more people legally could be in trouble?
Right now, you're looking at Paterno, you're looking at Sandusky, you're looking at Curley, the athletic director, Gary Schultz, who's the vice president of Penn State, and the president of Penn State, Spanier. You have all these guys that potentially could be sued from a civil standpoint, that's suing for money. Things like negligence, you could say that these guys were negligent. And what that means, when you sue for money, you say that, is go, look, you guys knew that Sandusky was doing this. You knew that he was abusing children, but you let him back onto the campus? Yeah, he retired in 1999, but he was still let back on campus and given the title of a retired assistant coach effectively. So you continue to put the kids in the way of harm, and that's negligence. That's what lawyers would argue. So all of these guys, Spanier, Schultz, Curley, Sandusky, Paterno, they could all be held liable from a civil standpoint, that is suing for money.
I'm going to throw out another angle here, and it's the group that Sandusky was working with, that charity group Second Mile. And there was a report that they had learned of things as far back as 1998, and only until 2008, when they learned more, stripped him of his status of working with children. There's a lot of people on that board, that honorary board. How many of them or that group period could possibly be involved from a legal perspective?
That's a good question. If there was any harm inflicted on children as a direct result of keeping them on that board or, as part of that organization, then they separately could be held liable. Do I think that that's going to be the focus of this? I don't. I think the focus will be what happened on the campus and in association with Penn State. But you raise, I think, Josh, a very fair point, is how far-reaching are Sandusky's actions? And how far-reaching is the harm? Because the more far-reaching that harm is, the more people that knew about it and did nothing, that is willful blindness, they too could be dragged in.
We are talking a very interesting conversation. Eric McGramella, a lawyer, radio sports legal analyst, hosts a radio show called Offside. He's with us on ESPN Radio at ESPNHawaii.com. You said something that I haven't heard before, and I credit you for that, but I also want to go a little deeper into that. You mentioned the possibility of civil proceedings. You know, a lot of people think of just, criminal cases, going to court, possible jail time, etc. Civil proceedings, civil cases. Could we hear a lot more about that, the word civil, when it comes to these cases as compared to actual criminal stuff with some of these ancillary parties here?
You know, I've always thought it should be renamed uncivil claim because there's truly nothing civil about it. But yeah, the civil claim that is suing for money, that is a separate stream from criminal law, like we saw with OJ, right? Murder, criminal charges, and then the family sued for money. They lost on the criminal side, but they won when it came to money. From a civil standpoint here, Josh, yeah, it would not remotely surprise me if lawsuits materialized, or at least a threat of a lawsuit materialized, and then these things would be settled. I mean, there is no way on earth that any of these people would want this lawsuit to make it all the way to trial. But it would not remotely be a surprise if you saw the families of victims come out and sue one or more of them. And I'll tell you as a lawyer, what we do, Josh, in a case like this, is you always start off by suing everybody. You would sue everybody involved, Schultz, Spanier, Curley, Sandusky, Paterno, because you then later try and figure out who's liable for what and to what extent. Now, parties may drop out of the lawsuit as the lawsuit moves forward, but you always include everybody. So right now, their lawyers are telling them, they all have their own lawyers. Lawyers are telling them, look, this is really complicated, and apart from the criminal stream, which at this point only seems to involve Curley and Schultz, but I'm saying, and Sandusky as well, but it may well pull in Paterno. From the civil standpoint, everybody might be pulled into a lawsuit.
And from your perspective, when you put that lawsuit together, when you say we're going to sue everybody, then you're trying to figure out a dollar amount. You're trying to figure out what this is actually worth. How do you come up with that?
Well, that's a good question. What lawyers only do is what's called a damage assessment, and that is look at the facts of the case, and you look at what courts in that jurisdiction have decided in similar cases. So in this case, it would be sexual assault on a minor, for example, and being negligent, for example. All of these different things, and you see how much money the courts generally award. So that's your starting point, but it is so difficult to tell, especially in a case like this that's got so many tentacles and so many people involved and so many people that potentially were willfully blind. This could be worth a lot of money.
We're talking with Eric McGramella. He's a lawyer. He's a radio sports legal analyst. He hosts Offside. He joins us on ESPN Radio and ESPNHawaii.com. Last, I want to get to the protection of those who are willing to come out and say, or however they're doing it, that they were affected, because we are hearing many of not necessarily names, and I'm fine with that because I don't want to hear those names. I don't think those names need to come out, but we're hearing people calling in to the authorities and saying they were a part of this. This happened to them. As a lawyer, lawyers will be involved here at some point. How do you ensure the protection of we could call them clients, but at the same time, more importantly, those victims and the protection of them as they feel the strength to come forward? It's a very difficult kind of thing to manage because, the public just may see them as lawsuits, and some lawyers just may see them as lawsuits, but they're also human beings that have endured some harm. And it's very tough for them to come forward, and they need that courage, and the right lawyer will support them in those circumstances. And it's like anything else, Josh. You have to sort of manage that person and be there for the person, not only in your capacity as a lawyer, but also in your kind of pseudo-personal capacity, not as a friend, but someone that is compassionate and empathetic to that victim, and then to help them along in the process. And the process itself, if it's not a simple settlement, can drag on for a very long time and create a lot of additional hardship on a victim because they relive the incident, they are in the public eye, and ultimately it is difficult for them to continue to cope. I have had clients in cases that are not remotely as dramatic as this that end up going on pharmaceutical preparations because they become so anxious
And these are just contractual disputes. Imagine what it's like for a victim.
I'm glad we got in touch with you. Eric Macramala, lawyer, radio sports legal analyst, hosts the radio show Offside. Eric, that is just tremendous analysis. I appreciate your time. Many thanks for joining us.
A pleasure, man.